So, there's a lot sort of detail in this tonight. Not as many images as not as many images as I could put in, but I thought if we're going to focus on the archaeologists, it might be wise to focus on the individuals rather than the archaeology. But you can obviously imagine that yourselves. So we're on it now. Andy's on his way. So what we're going to do is Margaret's got loads to tell us. So as Margaret's telling us loads of stuff, right, I will go off and make myself a drink. Sorry, Margaret, that sounded so disrespectful. David,
I'm used to it.
Margaret, we do love you. Andy loves you. David loves you. Pat loves you. We all love you. Right, the Pete's do as well. Right, David, any news this week?
No, sorry.
Right, okay. Pat's looking cold. He's thinking, I need to go back to California and vote for the next president of the United States. Right, Pat, any news from you this week?
No, sorry, I disorganized.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay, we got Andy joining us. Right, so that's good. Margaret, going to leave you a minute. Peter, any news from you this week?
No, sorry.
Right, Pete, I'm going to make you a co-host. Oh, you are a co-host. All right, then, fair enough. If we have any strange people like Dell joining us, I said it.
Yeah.
I got to be honest with you, right? Have you noticed that me and Drina must be lovers because we seem to like our glasses? Right, Drina, anything you'd like to say to us, lovely?
Two things. The book that something was talking about when tribes first of all worked together and had chiefs or leaders. And one of the places I looked at was Tal-Jinki in Train. It's
right, you're breaking up. Drina, you're breaking up a little bit. So
sorry.
Right.
A lot, or you want me to go off and come on again?
No, just slow it down as you're talking, but be a bit more clearer.
Okay. The book that I'm reading at the minute was talking about tribal groups and when the first leaders began being leaders, right? And one of the places they looked at was in Ukraine, Tal-Janki, and it's a settlement that's not a circle, it's like a squashed circle. And all the houses are arranged within the circle in the same way.
Okay.
And they're looking at it in the fact that nobody was first. They were all equal. They were one side by side. Nobody was in front. So I thought quite interesting.
There's a bit too much information here. So what you're not giving us enough information. So what date are we talking about? What date are we talking about when? Well, so you're talking about, as I would refer to, family community rather than family.
No, it's quite a big group. It was quite a few years, but ancient, prehistoric. I would think. I'm sorry, I didn't think
no date.
No,
you got no. Okay,
is it after the bone shed? Do you remember those bone shelters? That was Ukraine.
It could be, couldn't it? Yes.
After that, you think?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
So are we saying that I'm right?
Wooden stone buildings. Sorry.
Are we saying when I'm teaching this, I'm right because this is what I say. I say
yes.
I say Neolithic, and we got family sort of these pits are for families, and then we got sort of a confederation more than anything. There's no sort of overall leader, and then we've got sort of family community, and then we've got the community organized by people. Is that where we're going?
Yeah.
Good.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
I had physiotherapy today, and my physiotherapist is very slim. She's not skinny, she's just very slim. And I was thinking about the prehistoric people that obviously didn't have cakes and biscuits, that they would be very thin people. And are the images we get that people draw of them, are they, I don't know, you can't say accurate, can you? But would they be looking like that, or would they look very, very thin people?
Right. So give me an idea of right. Okay. We're just talking generally. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just try. Let's keep this general because if we right, the presumption that people were thin in the past is something that we've got to be very careful with. Next, we do have high and low metabolisms today and in the past. So I don't think anything's changed. So if somebody's eating and retaining their weight, then they are going to be big in the past as they are today. There might have been foods in the past that may have made people bigger. And also, when you think about this really logically, right? We've got a society where we've got vegetarians who can be big. We've got a society that we can have vegetarians that can be slim. Meat eaters who can be big, meat eaters can be small. But when we think about this logically, meat was more on the agenda back in the past, wasn't it? So surely that would mean that people would have been bigger. So you've got to be very careful when you make those presumptions, Drina, very careful.
Yeah, I was just, it was just occurred to me that I'd never thought about that before.
Yeah.
And that if you're hunter-gathering, it's like you've got to get what you can. There can't be that much. I mean, it'll keep you alive, but would you overeat? You couldn't.
Yeah, but hang on a minute, right? Hang on a minute, right? This is a really interesting point. The word hunter-gatherer is a really complex term because in Japan, in the early cultures of Japan, they had houses, but they hunter-gathered. They didn't actually have agriculture. We're talking about 10,000 years ago, but they still had set houses. So you're talking about hunter-gatherers where people did actually move around. I think the term hunter-gatherer is not really fixed. So if you're talking about hunter-gatherers moving around, right, they might. There's lots more animals around back in the past than there are today.
Yeah.
I think the figure's something like, I really wish I got the figure in my brain right, but I think the figure's like 80% of all animals on the planet are for human consumption and 20% are wild. Even if it's like 60 for human consumption, 40% are wild, right? So when we look at it that way, but there are nearly 7 billion people on the planet, so we're told, right? And the conspiracy theorists tell us there's a lot less than that, but that's something else. Not really interested in that. But when you think about this widely, if you think about 10,000 years ago, the ratio of animals to human beings would have been more or less 95 to 5% human beings, right? Or something like that. And the consumption rate would have been sort of 95 animals, wild to 5%. So what you're talking about, there's going to be a lot more flesh available to be eaten. So again, you've got to be very careful with that assumption that you're making, Drina.
Okay.
Very careful.
Thank you.
And then sorry, Drina. Then what you've also got to think of is that I'm not too keen on North American history in regards to the president's grant onwards. So you've got the assassination of Lincoln, you've got Johnson, Grant, and then those presidents talk about the mass annihilation of the buffalo, for example. So you've got millions of buffalo around that are wiped out, which would have provided food for the natural people, right? So that means that that would have meant that they would have had a high protein, high cholesterol diet, which was then restricted by the wrongful edicts of the new presidents that came after Lincoln. So again, you've got to be very careful with assuming that people were thin in the past.
Did malnutrition often crop up in the old skeletons that they found from that period? Is it often mentioned?
I think. Have you finished what you're saying, Drina?
Yes, thank you.
I think the point is that what you've got to think about. The quick answer is we're here, Margaret. Right. So they must have done something that preserved the human population. That's the answer. That is the answer. Sorry, spread answer.
The term hunter-gatherers covers what they did. They followed the animals and the vegetation through the seasons. They knew where to go for the best vegetation and the best animals.
Yeah.
whatever time of the year it was.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily reminiscent of permanent or non-permanent habitation. And I think that's a really interesting point to make. Very interesting point. We can't think of people in sort of moving around with their homes anymore. We've got to think about a different, to be honest with you, we've got to think about, there's no model anymore that fits. It's like modern day society. Some of us live in the countryside surrounded by animals. Others live on the streets of London. Others live in nice houses. Others move around all the time. Others people live in caravans. Exactly the same models existed in the past.
Yeah.
People like Peter, they lived on a boat. Well, that's hunter-gatherer, surely. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
as a boy, we lived in the country and we had chickens, and we also had pigs. Had 3 pigs to feed and butcher, and that fed us with meat, and the garden provided us with most of our veg.
Yeah.
So therefore, is that a hunter-gatherer? You've got to be very careful with the way you use these terms.
Yeah.
Very careful. Right, thanks for that, you two. Right, Peter C. Peter C looks as if he's like in a massive room, and it's like
Goes up and up and up.
it's almost as if he's a little coconut head on the side of the room. I don't think he wants to say anything. I think
It's disappeared.
He's trying.
it's disappeared on the ceiling.
That's better.
I got to be honest with you. How tall is the ceiling of our house? He's not even talking to us. I think I've upset him. Right. Okay. Peter C. Actually, I've got some news I'd like to tell you afterwards. It's to do with that issue that we occasionally talk about. So you'll have to stay on afterwards, Peter C. I'll need a quick chat with you. Right. Okay. So Andy, anything you'd like to say before Margaret gives us a huge diatribe of her life?
No, I've got nothing to add this week, thanks.
Right. So on that moment, I'm a bit behind with what I'm supposed to be doing here. So, right, Margaret, you've got to kill at least 2 minutes. And
well, I have a feeling this is old news. You will know.
Hang on, Margaret. We're talking about history and archaeology. Of course, it's old news. Silly.
But I think you know all about Wogan Cavern under Pembroke Castle, don't you?
Yeah, but we want an update on it. If you've got anything, yes, come on.
Well, it just came up on my phone.
Yeah,
but it's just describing Wogan Cavern, and is a large cave underneath Pembroke Castle. In the early 13th century, a wall was built across the cave mouth, and it's now accessed via a spiral staircase from the castle above. And they found multiple early prehistoric hunter-gatherer occupations over tens of thousands of years back to the last ice age, tools left by earliest Homo sapiens that came to Britain during the middle of the last ice age, found alongside bones of animals like reindeer, wild horse and woolly mammoth. But I think that's old news, isn't it?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Carry on.
That's it, really.
We didn't have much of an update when we were doing it, to be honest with you.
Well, the team have been led by Dr. Rob Dennis of the University of Aberdeen and Dr. Jennifer French from the University of Liverpool. So that would be an interesting place to have a look at, wouldn't it?
Oh yes, it would be having a bit of an update on that site. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Completely agree. So what I'm going to do, one thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and grab a drink, right? And Andy, talk about anything with us.
Just having me tea.
He's trying to eat.
What are you doing?
I was in Barra today, went to a funeral.
Oh,
I was quite surprised. Barra's right out on for those who don't know, right on a peninsula going out into the sea. It's quite flat, except it isn't. There's a hill behind it, which I never knew was there, which is with the crematoriums on top and a massive Victorian graveyard with all those high Gothic sort of like burials that are just amazing with loads of carvings and statues and
Oh.
columns all over them and that. I thought, oh wow. And you go through this huge like portico to get in there, and then you go up the
Carry on.
top. There's this modern boring building on the top, 1960s crematorium style boring building, you know. But it must have been a lovely one, once upon a time, a good place to be.
What's occurring on Walney Island these days? Weren't there some ancient footsteps?
Yeah, there are in the mud off the coast there. Yeah, they're still cataloguing those. The Morecambe Bay project going out doing those every now and again.
Yeah.
In the mud there. Yeah, I think they've picked up human and some animals, red deer and elk, I think.
Yeah.
But I haven't been and seen them, so.
Ah.
Yeah.
You don't often hear about elk, do you?
No. No, we haven't got any anymore, that's for sure.
Elks, no.
Wonder when they died out then.
I don't know.
No, nobody
Are they
mentions that, do they?
extinct? Are they extinct?
No, they are here in this country, but not worldwide.
No.
Get them in North America a lot. So.
Yeah. Yeah, there are not many wild. They're reintroducing beavers here, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not on Walney Island.
No. No.
No trees.
Were they supposed to be reintroducing socialism into Britain as well? Sorry, that's a political joke. Right, okay, right, let's crack on.
Oh, the revolution will start any time, I think.
Oh, right, yeah.
Well, I don't think nobody really care in Ironside, will they?
No, probably not,
We're
unfortunately.
too tired.
Yeah, they're all retired and rich.
Well, speak for yourself. Right,
I'm
okay.
not retired or rich.
No, well, I'm retired, but I'm definitely not rich.
Oh,
Drina's rich in love and spirit, so there we go.
that's true.
Right, okay, and Anne's rich in health tips. Right, so what I wanted to do today is look at the work of Kathleen Kenyon and Flinders Petrie, and what we are going to do is look at some images, and we're going to sort of discuss these figures and their contributions to archaeology. If I can get my thingamajig lined up, and hopefully everything will be flowing nicely. Hang on a minute. I've got two speakers on, right? And what we've got there, we've got some nice images, and let's get going with these figures, right? So, okay, let's just sort of see where we are, and I'm going to probably ask the question of everybody. Go for it. So folks, have you all heard of Kathleen Kenyon? Anyone not heard of Kathleen Kenyon? Anyone, not come across her at all? Because Kathleen Kenyon is a figure in archaeology that is larger than life. And we're not talking about her physique. She's a figure that really influenced the timeline of archaeology. She was somebody that set the mold of how archaeology was going to develop throughout the 1900s. And I could also say the same about this individual, Flinders Petrie. Flinders Petrie also set the mold how archaeology was to develop in the late 1800s and then through the early part of the 1900s. Both Kathleen Kenyon, there she is working, and the likes of Flinders Petrie devoted their lives to the study and the science of archaeology. And before you ask, have I used the wrong image, Pat? Is that Robert E. Lee? No, it's not. It is Flinders Petrie. Now, both of these individuals lived devotedly within the world of archaeology, and They lived to a nice, ripe old age, both of them. So instead of looking at those archaeologists, antiquarians in the late 1800s, who may have lived, 30, 40, 50 years or whatever, as we start to develop into the 1900s, archaeologists do have a set pedigree of living to a ripe old age. One thing I've done today is I've leveled out in Kenyon first, and then Flinders Petrie, and then you can start to get an idea for these individuals. And then we're going to examine a work that is beyond Jericho, basically some work about Kathleen Kenyon. And then we'll go down the other avenue of looking at the work of Flinders Petrie. And one thing I'm trying to do here is not to sort of say that one is better than the other, because that will be irresponsible of me. They must both be as equal as each other, because it's Sir Flinders Petrie and Dame Kathleen Kenyon, to give them their proper titles. So they've been recognised by the British state as outstanding contributions to archaeology. So we can't compare the two because they're equal. But what we can do is get a feel for their sense of masculine archaeology and feminine archaeology, or whether both of them actually isn't really interested in a feminine or male take. They just look interested in an archaeological take, which is, I think, where we need to be in this day and age, because so much is being said about sort of sexuality and how that should affect things and how it shouldn't. That is getting a bit long in the tooth. So it's probably best to try and feel these individuals and keep looking at the image of as they stick out at the screen here. And she's no young chicken in that either. So let's see and try to understand the likes of Kathleen Kenyon. And Kathleen Kenyon and I have got something in common. No, I'm not a female. Kathleen Kenyon was born on the same day as me. And anyone who knows my birth date will know the answer to that. She was born in 1906. She was born in London. And interesting enough, she passed away in Wrexham. So she didn't live into her 80s. She was 72, which is a nice age for an archaeologist. Nevertheless, as I said, she wasn't in her 40s or 50s. She died on August the 24th in 1978, Wrexham, Clwyd. She's referred to as an English archaeologist, a British archaeologist, if we want to use the correct term. And we open by saying who excavated Jericho to its Stone Age foundation. So we're going into the Neolithic period. We're really going back. We're going back to its real origins, and showed it to be the oldest known continuously occupied human settlement beyond the Neolithic world as well. I've got to say that. Now, what we do is we chuck in a couple of other names that these individuals worked with. And so the year comes in, it's 1929. Again, this is a bit of an overview. So she was born in 1906. 1929, she excavated with British archaeologist, obviously a male. No, obviously not a male. She excavated with Gertrude Cato Thompson, very controversial archaeologist because of her ideas associated with Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwean ruins in modern day Zimbabwe, southern Rhodesia. And this was a female excavation gang in Zimbabwe, which would have been one of the first in the world. Kenyon directed much attention to the archaeological remains back at home in ancient Britain, working at a number of sites and publishing numerous findings between 1930 and 1952. Now, remember, the world of archaeology seemingly back in the 1930s, 1940s, was dominated by male archaeologists at home, but that's in fact a fallacy. When you think about the work of the likes of Lady Wheeler, the wife of Sir Mortimer Wheeler, when we're excavating at Maiden Castle, we could look at Gertrude Bell as well, who's an amazing British archaeological figure, as long as Gertrude Cato Thompson. We put this work alongside the likes of the work at Sutton Hoo, where there were some female archaeologists involved in the late 1930s. And we also think about Gordon Child's work at Skara Brae in the late 1920s, 1930s. So it's a world that archaeology is developing very nicely at home, as much as it's developing abroad with the introduction of the work at Great Zimbabwe in 1929. Now, she excavated abroad, as we've already ascertained, and we also did say when we were doing the comparison of these two major figures in archaeology today, we did say that we'd chuck a bit of Roman in and other periods as well. So she wasn't unaware of excavating other periods of archaeological sites. She was very much into it. So she excavated the Roman town of Sampratha in 1948 and 1949 and 1952. And that is a site which is now in modern day Libya. So again, going abroad, excavating, that's a link with Flinders Petrie. Flinders Petrie would have been dead at this point in 1948, 1949, 1951, but he would be excavating in the Middle East and Africa as well. She was associated with the University of London Institute of Archaeology from 1935 to 1962 and served as principal of St. Hugh's College, Oxford from 1962 to 1973. And that, again, you've got a female in charge of how archaeology is being directed at home as much as it is abroad. Again, I said at the top of this, I wasn't going to focus on male and female. But as we're doing this introduction, I've got to sort of pepper the scene of bias, because we can't ignore the fact that archaeologists are seen as stuffy old men like Glyn Daniels and Sir Mortimer Wheeler in animal, vegetable, and mineral. But even that statement isn't true, because there were female experts with the radio and TV series Animal, Vegetable, and Mineral. It's just this perception of archaeology being dominated by male archaeologists, which is in fact very, very wrong. We've got to break away from that, and we've got to see that archaeology is a science that has been dominated by both sexes, and that's very important when we start to understand how archaeology has moved forward as a discipline. In 1973, she was created Dame of the British Empire, Dame Kathleen Kenyon. There's not many archaeologists who have been recognized on the highest levels as for their archaeological sort of prowess. We could look at Lord Colin Renfrew, who is a very senior archaeologist who's still around today. But archaeology was seen in the past as much more relevant than it is today, and I will stick my flag to that statement, because I believe that archaeology has become watered down now. It's not as seen as serious as it used to be. And I'm not going to criticize Time Team for that. I'm going to say that Time Team was a great sort of catalyst for archaeology. But there's something not quite right about how archaeology is being undertaken today. Again, more about our Kathleen Kenyon. while serving as director of the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem from 1951 to 1966. Kenyon conducted researches at Tel al-Sultan, Jordan, the site of prehistoric and Old Testament Jericho, the ancient city of Jericho, truly ancient. Though a chief interest lay in determining the dates of its initial settlement, going back to over 9,000 years ago, and its destruction by Joshua and the Israelites in around the year 1,425 years BC, she accomplished much more. Well, we can see she accomplished much more in what we've already said. She placed the establishment of an agricultural economy within the Jericho landscape 9,000 years ago, from which a massive stone wall and a great tower also date, and founded an elaborate domestic architecture from those dates nearly 9,000 years ago. And what we do have is an image, whilst we go through the story of Kathleen Kenyon, of some portraits, 8,000-year-old portrait sculptures of plaster modelled over human skulls, was particularly illustrative of a meticulous excavation technique. Now, Margaret, we've used the word meticulous excavation technique. Well, that's rather interesting. We really didn't see that when we were doing barrow diggers, but definitely one thing that we can compare. We're doing Flinders Petrie straight away in a moment. We can compare the prowess that was made in meticulous excavation, meticulous recording, and meticulous owning of archaeology. From 1961 to 1967, she turned her attention to Jerusalem. Writing related to her later work included Digging Up Jericho, 1957, Excavations at Jericho, 1965, second volume, Amorites and Canaanites in 1966, Royal Cities of the Old Testament, 1970, and Digging Up Jerusalem, 1974. I've heard Kathleen Kenyon being accused of being a Bible basher, right? She's definitely not that. She wanted to see the origins of a world that might be biblical or might not be. But in many ways, Kathleen Kenyon is accused wrongly of being a Bible basher, in that she proved lots of the stories in the Old Testament to be archaeological fact, which is a crime these days. So let's think now about the other introduction to the other archaeologist. And there he is. Oh, doesn't he look like a handsome man? He looks very similar to Pat's husband. He's also very handsome. Has he still got that beard, Pat?
Pardon?
Has he still got that beard, your lover?
Yes, but it's more like Santa Claus.
Right. Have you ever thought about tying him to the bed and cutting it off one night?
No.
That would result in divorce.
Nice and soft and fuzzy. Yeah.
Okay.
Soft. It conditions it.
Right, that's too much detail, Pat. Too much detail. I didn't even ask for that. Right, Flinders Petrie, Sir William Matthews Flinders Petrie, no less. 1953, 1942. A very aged man, and you know he was definitely dominating, a dominant figure in archaeology. He was born in Charlton, Greenwich, London, and funnily enough, died in Jerusalem, July the 28th, 1942, in Jerusalem. What a place to be dying in 1942, whilst the war in Europe is ever raging, where you might find a German or a British spy in a bar in Jerusalem, or very interesting time to be alive. Now, he obviously would have, sort of locked horns with Kathleen Kenyon, and I would say probably positively. Let's just not sort of put a wedge between these two figures. I don't think that would be appropriate. British archaeologist, and we see the term Egyptologist. Now, I never really sure what the word Egyptologist means when being an archaeologist. Egyptologist, definitely just interested in Egyptology, nothing else. Assyriologist, only interested in Assyria. But we're all boys and girls in the same club. We're all archaeologists who made valuable contributions to the techniques and methods of field excavation. Some of those techniques taken on by Kathy and Kenyon, but obviously developing their own. And invented a sequence dating method that made possible the reconstruction of history from the remains of ancient cultures, with little more than just saying that looks simpler, then that thing looks a little bit more complicated, and a little bit more complicated again. That means that the simpler stuff is older than the stuff that is really advanced. But that was something that was very, very special. Now, Catherine Kenyon's damed 1973. He's knighted in 1923. Now, again, a boy of the old school from 1853. And he's a figure. We mentioned his name in the last lecture to do with barrow diggers. We did mention his name, did we not, with some of those later diggers? So he, in a way, was coming from the old school of archaeology, coming into the new school of archaeology, and continuing into the new school of archaeology into the 1940s. Now, Flinders Petrie, God, I tell you what, right? You could put a Confederate uniform on him and he'd be way off in the American Civil War. Petrie was named for his maternal grandfather, Matthews Flinders, British navigator, pioneer, hydrographer, and explorer of Australia and Tasmania. So there we go. Grandfather Matthew Flinders, a frail child. Petrie was privately educated, early developing archaeological and ethnological interest, particularly in the area of ancient weights and measures and in Egyptology. There's a point I want to make there, and I'm probably not really sure I should make this point, but I'm going to make it. I think initially lots of us who turn to history and archaeology when we're young, we've got lonely childhoods. And history and archaeology makes us go into other worlds. It's an imaginary world where we can reinvent the past, where our own lives are not so happy. You know, I remember with my childhood, I felt very isolated, and history and archaeology was a way of escape. And when you look at that, a privately educated frail child, that's sort of similar. I wasn't a frail child, but that's something else. At the age of 24, Petrie wrote Inductive Methodology, 24, on the recovery of ancient measures from the monuments. So this is in 1874 that he writes that book, 1874, the recovery of ancient measures from monuments. That's an amazing time to be around in archaeology, a work that represented a new approach to archaeological study. Now, can I just mention something quickly? Now the world is starting to provide archaeologists and other countries. We've got Iraqi archaeologists who are interested in cuneiform and so on around this stage. We've got the likes of Schliemann coming from Germany. We've got American archaeologists. In fact, we've got some of the earliest people who are really studying archaeology, being some of the earlier presidents of the United States. So, you know, there's lots of other people involved in archaeology, lots of Italian archaeologists. We're starting to see people from around the world going into archaeology. So these new, fresh approaches to archaeology were enlightening the Danes and other people to go further. Field work done at various locations in Britain, including Stonehenge, enabled him to determine by mathematical computations the unit of measurement for the construction of the monument. Interesting. So another book. Here we go. 1880, Stonehenge, plans, descriptions, and theories. Love it. And you couldn't have a more enlightened, expansive journey that this man took. He went to the Great Pyramid at Giza, which initiated his 4 decades of exploration in the Middle East. So these two, Kathleen Kenyon and Flinders Petrie, what they're doing, they're going out into the world, right? They're going against what Leonard Cottrell would say in the 1950s. Why go and study archaeology in other countries when you've got archaeology on your doorstep? Well, these did archaeology on their doorstep, and they went abroad as well. So love it. During the 1884 excavations of the Temple of Tanis, Petrie discovered fragments of a colossal statue of Ramesses II. If any of you noticed the likes of Indiana Jones in his Indiana Jones Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones series of films, and the new one is coming out in a few weeks' time. He mentioned Petrie a few times. He's mentioned Petrie a few times. In 1884 and 1886, at Eucrates and Daphne on the Nile River Delta, he uncovered painted pottery by which he proved that those sites had been trading colonies for the ancient Greeks. Now, that's rather interesting. Like Kathleen Kenyon's work, allowing us to expand our knowledge of archaeology in different locations, he basically said that ancient Egypt, they were trading colonies for the ancient Greeks. It was this discovery that caused him to believe that history could be reconstructed by a comparison of potsherds, pottery fragments of various levels of an excavation. Now, this ties in similarly with some of the lectures I've been given, where I've said, you know, you can find little bits of evidence and you can use that evidence to sort of reconstruct the world of archaeological trade, who these people were, what the pottery was used for. Progress, sophistication of archaeology, the examination and classification of broken pottery became routine procedure. Up until that point, people were just interested in complete bits of pot, really weren't interested in the bits. Petrie made other important discoveries in Egypt. At Gorob, he found numerous papyri and Aegean pottery that substantiated dates of ancient Greek civilizations, including the Mycenaean. Now, talking about the Mycenaean world back in the late 1800s was something that would have inspired Heinrich Schliemann with his work at Mycenae and the work at Troy before his death in the early 1890s. At the Pyramid of Hawara, he searched through the tomb of Pharaoh Amen Nemet III to discover how grave robbers could have found the tomb's opening and made their way through the labyrinth surrounding the 2 sarcophagus that they emptied. He included that they must have been given the master plan by an informer. So somebody was talking about labyrinths under some of the pyramids. There you go. At Al Fayoum, also he made a rich find of 12th dynastic jewelry, which has been housed at the New York City Metropolitan Museum since 1919. He was delighted by his discovery of the earliest known Egyptian references to Israel on the stelae of Mereneftat, a king of Egypt from 1213 to 1204. So he's very much into his Egyptian stuff. Now, you'll find that our introduction about Flinders Petrie is rather longer than Kathleen Kenyon. And the reason why what we look at with Kathleen Kenyon is longer than what we look at then about Flinders Petrie. So it's quite balanced. In 1892, Petrie was made Edwards Professor of Egyptology at University College London. Like Kathleen Kenyon, Flinders Petrie has a university educated path in the wake of his archaeology. And he served in the position until 1933, like Kathleen Kenyon with her academic bent, when he became Professor Emeritus, 1933. In 1894, he founded the Egyptian Research Account, which in 1905 became the British School of Archaeology. So both of these individuals influential in the structure of archaeology around them. Petrie added to the knowledge of pyramid builders during his exploration of the necropolis of Abydos, the holy city of the cult of Osiris, god of the dead. At Tel El Amarna, he excavated the city of Akhenaten, Amenhotep IV, ruler of Egypt, from 1353 to 1336. And in a moment, directly you link in the work of Catherine Kenyon and the likes of Flinders Petrie when you look at Akhenaten and the Lost City. And obviously that talk that it's said that Moses may be associated with Akhenaten in some way or form, that directly links in with the work of Catherine Kenyon and biblical archaeology, revealing the now famous painted pavement and other artistic wonders of the Amarna age from the 1350s BC. 3,000 graves found by Petrie at Nakada, northeast of Thebes, were identified as those of primitive ancient Egyptians. Now, my direct link with Nakada burials is that when in 2011, when there was the Arab Revolution across the Middle East, we see the looting of the Nakada museum, which then sent tens of thousands of the flints of Flinders Petrie around the world, only to be imported into the likes of Germany as fakes. They went on the international market as fakes, only turning out to be the real McCoy. And I've got some of them, which when the guy who was selling these, I said, look, Michael, I said, you're actually selling the real thing. He said, oh, no, they're being sold to me as reproductions. I said, there's no way these are reproductions. Some of these are, you can see photographed in the cabinets at Nakada, and they're no longer there. So there's my direct link, right? And if they, I've got a few of them, and if anyone ever wanted them back in Egypt, they can have them. So in 1904, Petrie published Methods and Aims in Archaeology, the definitive work of his time, in which he lucidly defined the goals and methodology of his profession, along with the more practical aspects of archaeology, such as details of excavation, including the use of cameras in the field. Wow. Obviously, he's publishing his work like Catherine Kenyon. Again, Catherine Kenyon is already using camera photography and draftsman and all the rest of it. But Flinders Petrie was using photography to make detail. And one of the things I would say is this is directly linked to Howard Carter. That when Howard Carter built a house to excavate in the Valley of the Kings, and to then further his work at the tomb of King Tutankhamun after 1923, he actually used glass slides. And we know photography was used in massive degree by the likes of Howard Carter. And basically, when they were digging Howard Carter's home, they found lots of the glass slides still there. So the glass slide, so it's great, isn't it? So anyway, so I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but I want to mention Egypt and something there. With uncommon insight, he noted that research results were dependent on the personality of archaeologists, who, in addition to possessing broad knowledge, had to have insatiable curiosity. His own abundance of that characteristic was never questioned. And again, Kathleen Kenyon, these would have made a great couple, but Petrie had a wife that was definitely into archaeology as well. They slept in buses and going out the bus digging together. It was like, are you going to make the sandwiches today, love, or shall I? They both worked on the archaeology, him and his missus. Inscriptions that Petrie found on the Sinai Peninsula, again in Egypt, represented an intermediate age, not later than 3,500 years ago, of written communication between Egyptian hieroglyphics and Semitic alphabet. Although he wrote the formation of the alphabet in 1912, language was not Petrie's forte, and he depended on a sixth sense for free translation of inscriptions and for establishing dates through the study of the forms of hieroglyphics. And strangely enough, I do that as well. I've got that's my way of doing archaeology. I'm using your sixth sense. I was showing some of you guys earlier on about bits of broken inscriptions that we find in the soil around here, which is spread around the site, giving proof of the date of the site that I've used my sixth sense to date rather than using information that is absent. So it's having a sixth sense in archaeology is very, very, very important. And it's good to see that not only did Flinders Petrie have it, that Kathleen Kenyon did as well. Under the auspices, finally, of the American School of Research, he excavated in Palestine from 1927 until 1938, when he was 85. There's hope for you yet, Pete. In those years, again, at Tallahassee, he uncovered the ruins of 10 cities. Go on, Pete, get out there. His scientific methods provided the guidelines for all subsequent Palestinian excavations. He died in Jerusalem at the age of 89 with a trowel in his hand. There you go. So Pete's already gone. He's gone up to Orkney to go dig in. I provided some equipment, and make sure you send us some photographs, Pete. So that's basically a massive overview of these two figures. And then we're going to get dirty with Kathleen Kenyon and digging up the Holy Land. And I tell you what, it's she's there, and there are some of these wonderful sort of skulls. They've prepared a render on them and sort of prepared skulls. Great piece, great piece of work. What we're actually seeing here now. And I don't know if we've got anybody on. We've got some other people watching online, which is absolutely great. So I've got this online. So if anyone's got want to say anything online, then that's great. So Kenyon versus Petrie, a comparison. So one of the great things with Kathleen Kenyon is that we open by saying no archaeologist would ever confess to not knowing the name of Kathleen Kenyon. You all do now. So if I'm glad I didn't ask that question at the beginning of the lecture. Okay, you all know her. You know her. Whose legacy includes excavating the ancient city of Jericho, and whose other accomplishments and influences on the discipline of archaeology are countless. Miriam Davis's book, Dame Kathleen Kenyon, Digging Up the Holy Land, is a lively biography of the most influential woman archaeologist of the 1900s. I think that's quite a bold statement to make. Now, if that's the case, Dame Kathleen Kenyon being the most influential woman archaeologist of the 1900s. Could we say the same about Flinders Petrie? Well, that's going to be for you to decide, not me. And I'm not going to ask you that question. But it is quite a statement to make that the most influential woman archaeologist. I don't want to call that myself, really. But let's carry on. While providing both detailed insights into many of archaeology's most significant developments and full anecdotes of excavation in that period, Kathleen Kenyon, giving you some more detail, which we had done with Flinders Petrie, was the eldest daughter of the prominent biblical scholar and British Museum director, Sir Frederick Kenyon. You can't get a better start than that in archaeology, can you? You know, we felt she was a bit out on a limb, really, until we read that, because we know that the likes of, Flinders Petrie is a bit spoiled. He's out there, he's digging amongst some of the sort of great pioneers of antiquarian archaeology in the 1800s. Well, this lady's no exception to that. Who was also connected to the Institute of Archaeology, and the origins, really, of the development of the Institute of Archaeology in the beginning of the 1900s. and the Palestinian Exploration Fund, the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem, and the British Academy. Oh, we said a lot of that when we mentioned that with Flinders Petrie. And there's no way they didn't know each other, and there's no way that they didn't have a good old row. You can imagine old Flinders Petrie with his good old pipe smoking, and Catherine Kenyon sort of wiping the floor with some of his ideas. And why not? That's what archaeology is about. Surrounded by and associated with those of high social standing and undoubtedly abundant with social connections. You know, it's likely that Catherine Kenyon would have come across the likes of the Lawrence of Arabia, who was actually an archaeologist himself. Kenyon sort of ran in elevated circles, and she had a strong character of determination, like Petrie, and hard-headedness. And basically that pushed her forward. She had great success, and she's very determined. She was a bit she was a bit spoiled, really, and she was spoiled because she worked with that other great archaeologist, the great excavator of Great Zimbabwe, Gertrude Cato Thompson. Now, Kenyon first realized her passion for archaeology after joining Gertrude Cato Thompson, 1929, in the famous all-women excavation at Great Zimbabwe as a photographer. Yeah, you can imagine, you know. She basically went along, you know, with no intention of becoming an archaeologist. She wanted to be a photographer, you know. And we're so pleased she became an archaeologist. You know, anyone can be a photographer, burnt at the stake for saying that. But obviously, photography is still a great skill, you know, taking a good photograph, and taking a good photograph for an archaeological excavation report is very important. And this is what she was doing with Gertrude Cato Thompson. But she went over to the dark side and became an archaeologist. And she was free. She had freedom and liberty on the excavations in Zimbabwe. And being a student at Oxford's Somerville College, social preoccupations led to a poor final degree score, because she was so obsessed with archaeology that, in a way, it crowded her mind. And it wouldn't surprise you that my two dabblings with academia, with my postgraduate diploma in archaeology heritage with Leicester, and my Master of Letters degree with the University of Highlands Islands, it was like, I can remember one of the lecturers saying, it's very difficult teaching a lecturer in archaeology, like you, Carl, and because my mind was always somewhere else. And Kathleen Kenyon's exactly the same. It's when you're teaching an archaeologist who's already an archaeologist, it's a very difficult thing, because their mind, their brain set on a direction. Nevertheless, tutor Maud Clark wrote, Miss Kenyon can be relied upon to carry out with intelligence and energy any duties that she may undertake. This ability, as well as her presidency as the first woman of the Oxford Archaeological Society, ensured a popularity that would inspire to make certain Kathleen did not fall into the common and traditional calling of teaching school. So in other words, she just went out and did archaeology. Sod it. She's not going to stand as a school teacher teaching archaeology, which would have been an achievement, actually, teaching archaeology. She would have been one of the very first female lecturers at the likes of Oxford. There were others before, but that would have been an achievement. Nevertheless, breaking the barrier. Let's move away from that. But she would nevertheless been up there, been sort of very influential on that edge. Let's change the image. Let's move on with another image. And there we go. Isn't this such a great image? Spot the woman. Sorry, I couldn't avoid that one. There she is. Doesn't she look fine there? God, I tell you what, she was more of an archaeologist than the men around her, really. I've got to be honest with you. You know, Kenyon with workman at the jury wall, Leicester excavation. We're loving it. You know, she can imagine. And just, I got to be honest with you, the amount of respect those men must have showed her. It was like, my God, the foreman's a woman. She's got a dress on. I think that would have been so brilliant. You know, that would have been so brilliant. Archaeology today is massively dominated by female archaeologists, which isn't a bad thing. Isn't a bad thing. I went to a lecture not so long ago. Every single one was a woman, which is great. They wanted me to leave, I think. Anyway, no, it was great. They thanked me for going. Stop it, Pat. You know, it was good. It was a great lecture, actually. It was all these female speakers, and it was just like, I love this, you know, loving what they're actually saying from this other perspective. It was so good, Pat. After Zimbabwe, a decision to pursue archaeology, Kenyon worked at Roman Britain's third largest city, Verulamium, with the famous archaeologist Sir Mortimer Wheeler and his wife, Lady Tessa Wheeler. Tessa Wheeler took over the excavations at Verulamium, St. Albans. She took over the excavations. She's the one who wrote the reports. So you can imagine, Kenyon basically thought, you know, remember, it's 1906 she was born, right? On the 5th of January, there you go. Now you know my birthday. Don't forget presents next year, Margaret. Get them in a post. So she's excavating with a great female archaeologist at that stage, 1930s. So she's going to be, do the math, 24 years old. Their field technique, known as the Wheeler-Kenyon method, has influenced the practice of excavation to this day. Hang on a minute. The Wheeler-Kenyon method, yes. She was so influential with her work at Verulamium that Tessa Wheeler and Sir Mortimer Wheeler took on some of her ideas for the excavation. A 25-year-old snotty Kenyon influencing the excavations. And there she is. We're loving her. We really, really are. And she's actually there, not at St. Albans. She's actually at the jury wall, Leicester, the Roman jury wall at Leicester. I've always wanted to see the Roman remains in the centre of Leicester, but I never did, even when I was doing my first qualification there. And she worked alongside a William Smith geologist, developed the concept that materials accumulated on a site through a sequence of layers that explains the historical timeline, stratigraphy, that was put into archaeological practice by Sir William Flinders Petrie in 1890. So what she was doing, she was very much aligned with the thought and thinking of William Flinders Petrie. 12 years to, well, Flinders Petrie's got 12 years to go yet, so she would have locked horns with him, definitely. Kenyon applied this method of stratigraphic analysis through excavation within a series of 5 by 5 meter squares, allowing the exact find spot of the artifact to be compared with the strata. Earlier horizontal exposure techniques relied on architectural and ceramic analysis, hence were not so accurate. So in other words, boxes going down, reading the strata, recording both horizontally and vertically as you're going down to get an idea of the sequence in the strata. This is a technique which was developed on the back of Wheeler and some of her own ideas coming from Flinders Petrie. These 3 fiends of archaeology and Tessa Wheeler coming together, and obviously influenced by work with our Gertrude Cato Thompson at Great Zimbabwe. I know you want me to do Gertrude Cato Thompson sometime. I know you will. Kenyon joined the Samaria excavation in 1931, and then then what we've got, then what we got just before World War II, she excavated a site in the city of Leicester, the Jury Wall, late 1930s, which it said that was the most important excavation Kenyon conducted in the later 1930s. In other words, there she is, beautiful as she is. I tell you what, I'd have taken her out for a coffee. And I think it's so great that it's just archaeology is a science that that cut the barriers very early on. So, you know, when we talk about sort of, when we talk today, you know, we've got the first space woman, you know, we've got the first sort of female astroscientist, you know, we've got the first this, we got the first female that, and all the rest of it. Well, women were in archaeology early on, you know, so I think that's great. So it's sort of, it painted this sort of raison d'etre of archaeology very early on. So we got the excavations at Leicester, late 1930s, at this site. I think this is a great image. I'm loving it. I'm loving this image. I love this image. I dream of seeing this. Maybe I'll jump in the car with Andy and we'll go out there, Andy. I'll buy you dinner, right? But you're buying all the other food and the petrol. We'll take Pete with us. So she's excavating there, and you know it's dating. She excavated the site. The site, Roman site, dates to AD 160. These public baths of Roman Leicester, Rata, which is common Leicester, which common Leicester. There's a Roman name for Rata, Leicester, which obviously, you know, it refers to a rat. A rare example of civil Roman architecture with excellent mosaics and decorated walls. It remains one of Leicester's most famous landmarks. It is the UK's second largest remain of Roman civil masonry, any surviving anywhere in Britain. The one always missed out in lots of lectures. Alongside the one at Veraconian, Wroxeter, again, it's associated with Bath House. This is again majorly famous, but this one excavated by our wonderful Kathleen Kenyon. Now, Kathleen Kenyon, we look at the likes of, we go to the likes of Palestine, we go to Jerusalem, and we think about the work of Flinders Petrie. However, during the war, Kenyon proudly served as divisional commander in the Hammersmith Red Cross. Well, definitely. You couldn't give her another rank other than divisional commander, but then played a main role in the founding of one of Europe's most renowned archaeological institutes to this day, the Institute of Archaeology of the University College London, which was established in 1937, and the goal to provide instruction in proper excavation techniques. That's the Institute of Archaeology of the University of College London. She was a female influencing the direction of modern day archaeology. Alongside the likes of Flinders Petrie, these two figures are massive in archaeology. And I'm really going to struggle to find two other figures in archaeology who are as influential, but they are in mind, right? And they may not include Sir Mortimer Wheeler, or they may. Kenyon took the role of first acting director and secretary of the Institute of Archaeology at the University College London, but more importantly developed her role as lecturer and teacher, in which she trained a generation of archaeologists. Both Kenyon and Petrie influencing the next line of the way archaeology should go. Her position gave time to excavate other major sites, such as Sambratha in northwest Libya, and Bredon on the Hill and Sutton Walls in the UK. So she was like Petrie, excavating everywhere, and I think that's great. To be just excavating in Britain is stuffy, is one-lined, is one direction. To be out there understanding archaeology on another level is very, very important. I've excavated in Cyprus, I've excavated in the likes of Spain, but done nothing compared with the works of these individuals. Obviously excavated myself on many sites in Britain, but these figures are definitely up there. So here we go. There we go. These Jericho. Right. So the following years saw great development in both archaeology and Kenyon's career. Kenyon returned to Palestine after a 15-year gap. Her work at Jericho, Tel al-Sultan, on behalf of the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem, gave her world recognition as she made extraordinary discoveries about the Neolithic culture at the site in the 1950s. So Neolithic portrait skulls from Jericho. So basically they're skulls which are basically rendered over, clayed over, and you've got shell eyes, right? And she found these, she excavated these. And again, we are in the Neolithic field, we are in the Neolithic period as we're doing these figures. They do stand out in the world of Neolithic archaeology. So Neolithic culture in the Middle East, located in the Jordan Valley, north of the Dead Sea. Jericho is one of the oldest cities in the world. And I was a bit cagey with my dates earlier on. I said 9,000 years ago. And I may have said maybe a little bit earlier than that. Some archaeologists thought that the earlier origins of Jericho go back another 2,000 years before that, to 9,000 years BC. That puts it on par with Çatalhöyük in Turkey, and the likes of Göbekli Tepe as well. So this work is before the excavations at those two sites. So again, Jericho interpreted as one of the earliest sites of worldwide archaeology in regards to settlement. And I mentioned last week when we looked at DNA, we looked at sequencing of those types of things. It's just that case that we see in places like Jericho the origins of these earlier outbreaks, the what would be called place zero, place A, the epicenter of the outbreaks of places, things like TB, for example. We always talk about where plagues, Eurestis pestis, come from. We always talk about where SARS 1 and 2 came from. We always talk about where these things come from, and it's likely that Jericho was one of the places that you get these outbreaks beginning because of close proximity of people. Talked enough about that. In addition, with her work in the Middle East, it prominently figured in the Old Testament's book of Joshua. The Bible tells of its capture by the Canaanites by Joshua, its sacking and rebuilding by Herod the Great, and the destruction of its heavily fortified walls by fleeing Israelites under mysterious circumstances. She found evidence of lots of walls and destruction. You can make of that as you will if you're studying the Bible. She found the evidence. Again, I'm sorry I used the term Bible basher earlier on, because it's not really appropriate, okay? What I meant by people who are obsessed by the Bible, not true Christians, but people who just say everything in the Bible is real, right? But I'm not a Christian, right? But I believe that most things in the Old Testament are real and did it happen, right? And you've got Kathleen Kenyon to thank for that. So the city's proximity to good water supply, its fertile land, a favourable climate made it amicable for occupation, which is documented to go back to the Mesolithic and through the Neolithic and Bronze and Iron ages. So basically, when we talk about Tel al-Sultan, it's a site near modern day Jericho, basically, which is established as the old Jericho. Jericho was excavated by 3 other groups prior to Kenyon's investigations. Hers were the first to use more modern techniques. And those more modern techniques were able to take us down the layers, down the steps in time to the very earliest layers. I tell you what, right? You know, that would really freak me out going that low, you know. Loving it, you know, look at how low we've got those various sequences, you know, we're seeing it, we understand. So she was able to establish the first occupational history and furthermore demonstrate that Jericho was heavily fortified and had been burnt more than once. So when we think about this sort of sequencing, sort of really looking at the sequencing, you can see the sequencing there. I don't need to point it out or anything. And this is something that would be looked upon, not frowned upon, by the work of Dolfold and Schliemann in their work at Troy, and looking at the sequencing, looking at the layers being very important. This is not opposed, but is opposed to the work at Flinders Petrie, because when Flinders Petrie is working in the sand in the Garda, he's finding bodies that are in sand with no layers. So his layers are the seriation method that he's using to differentiate the way that you look at the development of rims on pots. That's his layers, where you get the simplest pots to the more complicated pots with rims and handles and so on. So you can't get layers in all archaeological sites. That's Flinders Petrie's layers. Kathleen Kenyon's layers are set layers with different colorations and so on. She uncovered the first walled city full with houses and courtyards dating back to the Neolithic. Also towards the end of the 1953 season, her and her team had found a human skull modelled with plaster, again looking back at them, to resemble an actual living human being, complete with eyes made out of shells. 7 more were to follow. There they go. The story, so if we got, well, there should be 8 there, shouldn't there? 7 more were to follow. The story hit newspapers across the globe, while she would lecture to draw attention to the site and frequently appear on radio. She realized the power of the public and would advise her students to write for the general public, always being sure to include lots of pictures in order to raise money. Another great find was the ancient tower and stairs that predated the oldest Egyptian stone structures by thousands of years. Now, that's a really good point there, and a point that you may have missed. And this is something that I very much believe in. If you're going to do archaeological work, people who do the archaeological work should pay to excavate on archaeological sites. Archaeological work should be funded properly. You should go cap in hand to the public to fund the work, because it's the public that you're doing the work for, public information to tell the public about archaeology. So, you're paying an archaeologist to teach you. I'm not doing this free today, but it's something that we've got to do to get respectability. We can't do archaeology free of charge. There has to be a price tag, because we do it for you. And I mean that. And this is what Kathleen Kenyon did. She said, you need to pay for the work because you're not going to get the results. And she got the results. Back to what we're doing. Another great find was the ancient tower and stairs that predated the oldest Egyptian stone structures by thousands of years. I haven't got that image today, but I haven't got the image, because there is an image where you can see the tower clearly, right? You could just see it on the right of there, right? Okay, you could just see it on the right there. That's the tower. And basically, and obviously, these steps are, those are not, these are steps to get to the archaeology more than the actual steps that it's referring to. But that's part of the ancient tower on the right there, which I haven't got a clearer image of. I do apologize for that. But you're looking at real history, and you're thinking about this Neolithic archaeology. It's way back, way back. It's 9 o'clock now, and what I need to do, I need to take a break myself. I need to feed the animals. So the sun's out here. It's not red sky at night, so it's going to rain tomorrow. I'm going to take a break, and we will somehow go to there we go. And I don't know, I'm a bit sort of worn at this minute. I'm going to look in the chat box. Somebody said, I've sent an email with my comments, questions, technical difficulties. Peter C. Right. So, right. Okay, Peter C. Whilst I'm going to ask David. David, have you got any news, lovely? Any, not news. Have you got any questions, David?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Peter C, here we go. He's got thoughts here, which I'm going to do. Drina, anything you like to say? And we've got your lovely face, and you've got to mouth the words of Peter. Okay, I'm sorry. You've got to verbalize this. Now you go slowly after me, Drina. I'm having real technical problems for some reason. Do you want to email? Do you want email me your questions? I also do need to get an early as possible night tonight. Anyway, here's my thoughts. Never heard of Kathleen Kenyon. Peter, I wasn't having a go. It is interesting that despite her ability, knowledge, experience, and technical brilliance, she is still criticized for her ideology. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be doing that criticism. And I'm not going to say the reason why. I feel like someone with aims would not be well received by academia today. I knew of some of her finds, Jericho, but had never had a name connected. Petrie, I know through Egypt. Interesting that you say he was interested in weight and measures from a young age, as I know he continued to be interested in measurements. I believe his measurements of the Great Pyramid are still a standard regularly referenced. Peter, am I right in thinking that he got the area and the everything to the Great Pyramids to an accuracy of 0.01 millimeter or something? He got the science so right on that, the measurements. Question, what do you think separates archaeology like Kenyon and Petrie, contemporary well-known archaeologists? Today, or other contemporary well-known archaeologists? I'm going to answer that. I would say it separates them because they live and breathe archaeology. And they lived and breathed archaeology, and most of their lives was archaeology. Years ago, and I'm going to say this, it was very upsetting for one of my students to turn around and say to me in a class in front of everybody, the only thing Carl thinks about is archaeology first, his children are a distant second, and his partner is somewhere at the bottom of the list. And when she was challenged by that, and I said, that's not really a good character of Carl. He said, yeah, I truly believe that. He's obsessed with it. He doesn't, yeah, yes. And that was in a class that you attended, Pat, but it certainly wasn't you who said that. I think the answer is that you've got to be obsessed with archaeology that separates you from other archaeologists. Pat?
Oh, I was just thinking, I did meet two women in the late 80s. Both of them had an archaeology degree, and they had nothing good to say because they couldn't get a job. You know, it was discrimination. It was all men. You know, they just had an awful time. So they gave it up. You know,
right. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, they became social workers or something, you know. But yeah,
right.
Hard thing to get in, being a woman.
Well, I would say Pat now is completely different. 75% of yeah, I think 75% of all. Well, I don't think I think it's 75%. Most people going into university to do archaeology are women. I would say a big chunk of archaeologists are women. It's probably more over half, but it's like something I would say 75%.
Change, you know, in 20, 30 years. Yeah.
It's massive, massive change, Pat. Massive change. You used to go to archaeological lectures and it used to be mainly men. Now you go to archaeological lectures and it's mainly women. And that's the change. And
were these well off? Was she well off and he well off? These two, you know, that were so famous.
I think I think they. Well, Petrie did have a little bit of money to start off with. Kenyon probably just probably just went out and did it. And you know, you could say archaeology. What my answer, Pat, is that you don't do archaeology for money, right? That's the answer.
Right.
I got to tell you this, right? I got to tell you this, right? Years ago, this was in, I think, about 2010. If you remember Clive Simpson, he said that there was this woman who was excavating at the St. Lythers burial chamber as part of like a university project. They did a couple of weeks there. And she said she had camped out in December at the site, right? And she said to, I would do the rest of my life digging these sites. You know, this is all I would love to do for the rest of my life, right? And you know what, right? I always thought I really wish I knew that woman, Pat, and I never ever met her. Yeah, there you go. Oh, but that's life.
Yeah.
Anyway, Pat, does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Right, and I do believe what we're going to do. We're going to aim to finish just before 10 tonight, anyway, because we're going to try and do that. So if we don't fully get Flinders Petrie done, it's by us. Right, Peter.
No, not fine.
Right, okay, let's try and get through these quick now because I got to get this done. Andy.
No, thanks.
I'm not threatening you. You don't have to.
I thought I'd be quick.
Right, okay then. Right, we're not going to be quick with Margaret. Go on, Margaret.
Well, I'd written questions down and you've answered them already.
Wow.
See how good I am, Margaret. See how good I am. And right, okay, what I'm going to do, we're going to have a 10-minute break. I'm going to speed outside. I'm going to do this quick, and I'm going to put the kettle on, and we'll be back at because I know Pat's got to go at past. So we'll be back at 9:18. Stop the clock, Annika Rice. I've got to go. See you in a minute. Okay, go, 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 go. Go, 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 go. Go, 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 go. Go, 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 go. Speedy animals, speedy animals, la 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 la.
I'm going to assume this is still not working. Can you hear anything?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
What, clearly, or is it a bit?
Yes. No, it's fine.
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly clearly now.
Great. Oh, good.
It is breaking up a bit, but now.
Yeah. No.
Now it's all broken
breaking up. Really breaking up.
Yeah. Have to say.
You still eating, Andy?
Yeah, just had me pudding. Thought I'd save it to the break. Nice little chocolate mousse.
Oh, very nice.
Oh, it is. It's a nice one. Sets me up for the rest of the night.
Oh, right.
Have you heard anything from Sandra?
No, I haven't. I haven't contacted her for some time. I should do.
Well, no news is good news, as they say. I'm sure you would have
Yeah.
heard of anything
Well,
going
yes,
wrong. But,
I'm sure I would have done. Yeah.
Pete seems to be having problems tonight.
Hmm. I see Cedric's in the background there with Drina.
Sorry,
See Cedric in the background.
Idris, yes. Cedric.
Did you not know that was his real name?
Can you lift your arm up any higher, Drina?
A little tiny bit more, yes. Yeah, I saw the physio last Tuesday and she gave me lots of exercises, so it's
Good.
easier to do them now I'm home.
Yeah.
You know,
You'll have to have
Yeah.
a competition with David. He broke his arm the same time as you broke yours.
oh really?
Can you
Yeah.
lift your arm up, David?
Oh yeah, my arm's all right. It's my wrist.
Oh,
Oh.
okay.
Oh yeah, it was my wrist I broke.
Oh, I thought it was
Yeah,
your
I'm
arm.
still stiff every day when I wake up. It's still stiff as a board.
Oh, heck.
Yeah.
What happened to the other fella?
He's alive. No, I'm surprised it's taken so long.
Mm. As you get older, these things do.
Well, that would be right if I was getting old.
Ah,
Well,
Good attitude.
just a number.
that's the way you got to think about it. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Just a number.
Right, we're back. Let's get cracking again. Right, it's a bit longer than I thought, but never mind. Right, okay, 15 minutes actually. So back to Kathleen Kenyon. It was really good to have in everybody's views before the break. And obviously we're going to crack on. I do believe Pat's got to leave us in a few moments. So have you got to go smack on at 1:30, Pat?
No, I might stick around.
All right. Well, at least get to the end of Kenyon anyway.
I'll
We're
try.
not gonna do the full Petrie anyway. Definitely not. But anyway, we might. Therefore, there's been a bias in me. Yeah. Anyway, there's not. It's just the way it's happened. Right. So okay, let's just get back to it. So right. So right, back to this image again. Loving this, and hopefully this is what we're seeing on the screen. And again, we're loving that. So I got to get back to it. So yeah, more academically, however, her application of the Wheeler-Kenyon method led to a disagreement with conclusions supporting the biblical stories and sparked the beginning of the overturning of biblical archaeology. So that's a really interesting statement, because I'm of the view that, you know, Kathleen Kenyon sort of corroborated these stories of the Old Testament. But in my defense, I would basically argue that, you know, we're not doing it by the dating system. Okay. And that's exactly what Kathleen Kenyon's saying. You know, it didn't all happen in a couple of thousand years. It happened over thousands of years. So, you know, this is her work had immense influence over the archaeological world and what was going on in the Middle East at that time. A very political pot, I may say. Despite her own sincere Christian beliefs, she was not concerned about trying to prove biblical accounts, you know, smack on, you know, and in fact disagreed with prior conclusions supporting biblical stories, demonstrating that Jericho was not a story of steady upward progress of civilization, instead of the typical view of the progressive nature of the divine revelation. Make of that as you will. Once again, her role in developing a stronger archaeological methodology, and in both technique and ceramics, influence the practice to this day. So what we're trying to say by all that stuff about the Bible, not just discarding it. I think the point is that we're excavating places that have walls. We're excavating places that have burnt layers, and they happen to be closely following some kind of timeline in the Bible, right? And yeah, we'll say that, but I think what Kathleen Kenyon's saying is, you know, it didn't sort of, what her work didn't do was stick precisely to biblical events, and what other biblical archaeologists are trying to do is trying to make them stick directly to biblical events. The problem is the Bible is quite a short book, and it's not taken account of every single archaeological event in history, right? So you can make of Kathleen Kenyon's excavations as you will, whether they fit into the biblical narrative or not. So that's that said. Right, quickly, Pete, because we haven't got much time.
That obvious line there of time with the white bits poking out. Was there anything out there? You mentioned anything about that bit?
To be honest with you, Pete, what would be good to visit the biblical, to visit this actual section, and to, you know what we should do, Pete, actually, is to get this image up, right, and to have this image with all the periods labeled. That's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, that's what I want. That's what we'll do, but it's not going to be today. I've written that down, Pete. You check that in another lecture. Yeah. Good. No, please. I want. This is the contributions that I like. So now, Sir Mortimer. So obviously, we're looking at her techniques being influential. Sir Mortimer Wheeler's book, 1954, Archaeology from the Earth, and Beginning in Archaeology, written by Kathleen Kenyon, were among the first publications to shy away from informal archaeological recording and advocate stratigraphic analysis. So what we're talking about, as Peter just said, we need to know about the layers. We need to know what's in the... Peter, actually, it's almost as if you read my notes. We need to know what's there. We need to know what all that speaks how that all moves in and mixes with each other. And I don't know if any of you were doing my lectures that looked at Following the Line by Tim Ingold, but I take this even further, that all those lines intermingle. Those events, those lines affect cause and effect of earlier and later. There's some lines that break into earlier lines where you've got post holes, walls going into earlier layers, and all the rest of it. That would be a good lecture. And actually, I think there's another image. You've got me writing stuff now, which is dangerous, isn't it, Margaret? Margaret knows what I'm on about. An image, there's a specific image that defines everything that I've mentioned there by Tim Ingold, which again, we need to leave that for another day, right? So she suggested that strata be separated and numbered, and that in interfaces between deposits of stratigraphic excavation, which had previously been ignored, be taken into account. So in other words, Peter, we need to know about those layers. We need to know how they work, how they all sort of have that sort of, they read like pages in a book. This is what Kathleen Kenyon's saying. And it's very difficult to think that that wasn't the be all and end all as it is now. But before her time and Wheeler's time and Petrie's time, it wasn't the be all and end all, right? Basically, oh yeah, we got a bit of archaeology there. It tells us this and that, and we walk away. So we're now talking about names in archaeology. Wheeler, and Peter earlier on mentioned our other Peter. He mentioned about sort of, you know, Kathleen Kenyon not being the most well-respected archaeologist out there, but nor is Sir Mortimer Wheeler. I'm certainly not. And all archaeologists, there's critics against us, even naturally in archaeology. In 1962, here we go. Let's start to move along. In 1962, she was invited to be principal of St. Hugh's College in Oxford. Meanwhile, from 1961 to 1967, she continued to work on her site, her last site in Jerusalem, searching for the city of David, which sort of contradicts the biblical thing, but we can see what she's doing now. She's actually lapping it up. This is what Sir Mortimer Wheeler did. He said, oh, look what we've got. We've got Maiden Castle, right? You know, there's going to be bodies, there's going to be banks and ditches. Is where Vespasian went. There's a siege there and all the rest of it. We're going to find a cemetery and so on, right? Is to get people to fund excavations. Most of what I've said wasn't true and didn't happen, but it was Sir Mortimer Wheeler did the same thing with the excavations in 1925, 1926 at the Kenyon Amphitheatre, where he basically said, this is King Arthur's Round Table. People put in hundreds of their money at the time, which obviously to get people interested. So searching for the city of David, you're going to get people wanting to fund that, definitely. Whether she believed in being the city of David or not, let's have the money. There we go. Some claim that it was a failure, but Kenyon's accomplishments were greatly overshadowed by the unstable political environment and occupation of Palestine by the Israelis. At the end of her career, she became more occupied with academic life before retiring in 1973. It was during these years that she worked on the reports of Jericho and Jerusalem for publication. 5 years before her death, Kenyon was appointed Dame of the Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II. She is actually, from, you know, lots of the image that you see of Kenyon in her earlier days, in her 30s. She looks a smart-looking woman, and that's Kenyon with her dad, Sir Frederick Kenyon, in the 1930s. There we go. He looks rather proud. And that, in a way, answers some earlier questions. You know, did she have a little bit of money behind her? But if her dad didn't approve what she was doing, she would have gone and done it anyway. So, you know, I think that answers the question. So, oh yeah, we can't not have this image. Loving it. Kenyon as a human individual, through personal confessions to a sister and stories from fellow colleagues and friends, while continuously demonstrating ingenuity. One of the first stories tells us that Kenyon relates to a first ever archaeological experience in Great Zimbabwe. Having her acceptance on the expedition facilitated by her father and further connections, she had gone with absolutely no experience. When she asked what she was there to do, she would reply that she hoped to be able to elucidate its problems by the aid of stratigraphy, which she later confessed as having no foggiest notion of what this meant. So in other words, she was saying things, right, not understanding what they meant, and then she understood what they meant by putting it into practice and being at aid of her own. In some ways, that's how I do archaeology some weeks. The irony behind that, later in her career, she was known as the mistress of stratigraphy through her significant breakthroughs. You know, I'm a victim of that. And many times I make predictions, and many times I'm right, even not knowing the foggiest some days of what that prediction is about. Very similar to what Catherine Kenyon was doing in her earliest years, talking about stratigraphy. We hear another story from the site of the Dead Sea Scrolls and how Kenyon had crashed a car loaned to them by the American school. Peter, I'm not good at driving, am I? No one was seriously hurt, and Kenyon, unflustered, called out through the car window, looked around and demanded, "Where is my trowel?" And you know what? That's happened to me on the way back from my archaeological excavation in Kayawent. The car went over on the motorway, and I wandered around the motorway looking for the artifacts in a daze, with the police arresting me for picking up the artifacts off the M4 motorway. That actually happened. We're all rather nuts as archaeologists. Another Leicester-related anecdotal demonstrates hard-headedness. She is known to have always wanted to be present at their excavations each day. In this occasion, with obligations ranging from the excavation, the Institute, to curator for the Palestine collection, the excavation committee was growing impatient with a full schedule, wanted to start work without her. And basically, she needed to be in charge. She was the one in charge. You can tell she's in charge. Pete, I wouldn't mess with her. Kenyon insisted the excavation could not begin until her term was over and refused adamantly. So she was working in Oxford when she was going to the Middle East. It could not start without her, and refused adamantly to suggest any possible replacement or qualified individual. And so she was threatened to be pulled off the project. She had to be there. And that's learning from the work of earlier archaeologists. You know, Margaret, can you remember those barrow diggers? They would have like 10 excavations going on at a time, and they would eventually see the excavation, knowing that it's all been trashed by the diggers. She had to be there. She needed to be there. This caused tension, but at the end, she prevailed, and that season found a late 2nd century engraved gold signet ring and the jewelry wall. So this is what we're talking about. She needed to be excavating in Leicester. She needed to be excavating in the Middle East. She needed to find these things and be there at the excavations. And finally, about Catherine Kenyon, the new Dame Catherine Kenyon. It's basically, she was an extraordinary woman. In addition to looking at Catherine Kenyon's career, we can gather detailed information and testimonial from those who knew her to form a colourful and insight into a life, an incredible, influential Dame of Archaeology. So Dame of Archaeology, which she was. It could be said that, you know, intellectually, she was up there. We talk about the environment of an archaeologist and how we see her career affecting everything in her life. Her career affected her personal life, everything. She was an archaeologist, nothing more, nothing less. Catherine Kenyon shaped the discipline of archaeology significantly with her contributions to institutions, training of archaeologists, evolving methods, and extensive fieldwork and publications. Her achievements were recognized while she was alive and continued to be praised after her death in 1978. How one could accomplish so much is astounding. It shows that it takes to be a great archaeologist. And she was a great archaeologist. And what we need to do, we've got 22 minutes to talk about Flinders Petrie. How? I don't know. But we got to go over to Flinders Petrie now. There he is. Flinders Petrie of Bidos. Couldn't be anything less, couldn't be anything more. And, you know, let's talk about Flinders Petrie from the direction of what you know, what academics tell about him. You know, this is let's just see a little bit more about Petrie, and then we'll see what else we can do before we end today. So Flinders Petrie, as we know, 1853, 1942. And I would actually like one of you this week, and if Peter C is too busy, then maybe Margaret or Drina, to see how many archaeologists have been knighted for their services to archaeology. How many archaeologists have MBs and and OBs and CBs for their influence on archaeology? And I don't think the list is going to be huge. So that's whoever's homework. Flinders Petrie were most influential, important figures in the history of Egyptology / archaeology. He was an archaeologist who 60 years in the field produced an enormous amount of archaeological evidence for all periods of Egyptian history, from prehistory through to medieval times and other areas of archaeology around the world, no doubt. The 1,000 or so publications, listen to this, the 1,000 or so publications he produced, the 1,000 or so, again, repeating that 3 times, he produced a testament to his tireless endeavors to recover information before it was destroyed by modern developments in cultivation and by urbanization. Such output was perhaps too prolific for the long-term, detailed and meticulous excavations that characterize archaeology today, but nevertheless, Petrie's many achievements had a profound influence upon the disciplines of Egyptology and archaeology. He advanced chronological methods, chronology, stratigraphy, chronological methods, reading those layers as dates in the pages of a book, through his invention of sequence dating, seriation for the pre-dynastic period, and in 1891 is established work on Greek pottery. Petrie was emphatic that everything excavated was to be noted, every seemingly small innocuous items, and this was perhaps one of his most important contributions. Everything has a contribution in archaeology, folks. And if anyone ever have a lucky to have a come on an excavation directed by me, everything is sifted. And I always challenge a metal detect enthusiast to metal detect on a spoil heap to find anything I've missed. And they never ever find anything. And then I send them packing. Petrie's archaeological training began in Britain in 1872, when he surveyed Stonehenge with his father, followed by many of England's other earthwork monuments. He first visited Egypt in 1881. Remember, he was born in 1856, to survey the pyramids, and became joint secretary of the Egyptian Exploration Fund in 1883. This organization gave him the opportunity to dig in Egypt for the first time in 1884, and a lifetime of work was set in motion. He was honored with the position of the first Edwards Professorship at the University College London, where he established an important collection of Egyptian antiquities that were primarily assembled for educational purposes. This collection remains an invaluable archaeological resource for Egyptian studies, and you can obviously still see his collections at the Petrie Museum of Egyptian Archaeology, and there's a website associated with it. So University College London, there we go. So it's the home archaeology is emanating from London. Obviously, we are looking at the work of Catherine Kenyon. And what I'd like to do now is just talk a little bit more about Flinders Petrie's contribution and no doubt we've already looked at of some of what we're going to mention now, but you know, interesting point. Petrie was also raised in a Christian household, but everything that he did, in a way, went against, you know, sort of the pages of Christianity, in the same vein, to the likes of Kathleen Kenyon. My God, he looks again. He does look like a general, doesn't he? He definitely does. He did have a sort of wide-ranging sort of bent in excavation, and his father taught him how to survey accurately, laying the foundations for his archaeological career. At the age of 8, he was tutored in French, Latin, and Greek. Naturally, you know, he was taught at home. He had to collapse, and he was a bit frail. Obviously, it didn't stop him to live into his late 80s, did it? He also ventured onto his first excavation opportunity at the age of 8, at the brazen Roman villa on the Isle of Wight. The boy was horrified to hear the rough shoveling out of the contents, and protested that the earth should be pared away inch by inch to see all that it was in it and how it lay. And he says, all that I have done since, he wrote when he was in his late 70s, was there to begin with. So true it is that we can only develop what is born in the mind. I was already in archaeology by nature. Do you know what? I can remember a similar circumstance when I was a child. I must have been about 8 years old. I went to Old Sarum with my grandparents, and I'd done a little bit of research. And I'd found out that Old Sarum had been a Roman site. So I went to the custodian and I said, this had been a Roman site. And he said, no, it wasn't. It's a medieval site. I had a big row with this guy. And my granddad said, yeah, but he knows more than you. And I said, yeah, but I've read a book. So became the Edward Professor of Egyptology, Archaeology, University College London. He continued to excavate in Egypt, and in 1904, Petrie published Methods and Aims in Archaeology. Remember, he mentioned this, the definitive work of his time, in which he defined the goals and methodology of his profession, along with the more practical aspects of archaeology, such as details of excavation, including the use of cameras in the field. Insights include the contention that research results were dependent on the personality of the archaeologist, who he felt needed to possess broad knowledge as well as insatiable curiosity. His own abundance of that character was never questioned. And that is a very, very good point, because if you aren't able to think outside the box as an archaeologist, you're not an archaeologist. If you're not able to question yourself and admit that you're wrong, you're not a good archaeologist. And somebody asked the question earlier on, and this was you, Peter, what puts these individuals out from modern archaeologists? Too many modern archaeologists will not admit they're wrong. I've got things wrong in excavations, and I've told you, right? I'm not a great archaeologist, but at least I've got the ability to question archaeology and my own work exactly the same that Flinders Petrie did. In 1913, Petrie sold his large collection of Egyptian antiquities to the University College. You mentioned, how did these people get their money? Where it is now housed in the Petrie Museum of Egyptian Archaeology. One of his trainees was, in fact, Howard Carter, who went on to discover the tomb of Tutankhamun in November, early November 1922. So, you know, we mentioned that I would try and give a little bit more about our friend here. And I did mention his wife, Hilda. And she was born in 1871, and a few years is younger, actually. Died in 1957. and he married in London on the 26th of November 1896. So at the age of 40, he had a little bit of time for his archaeology. And the couple had 2 children, John, who died in 1972, and Anne, who died in 1989. John was born in 1907 and Anne in 1909. And guess what? They were brought up with bits of pottery in their mouths, right? They would suck on bits of pottery. Actually, they would take part in their parents' excavations, and they would take part in the work of their parents. They followed their parents within the archaeological world. And interestingly enough, I know we're talking, let's go do a little bit more content in a moment, but I think legacy of Flinders Petrie is as important as his work. So if we don't, I'm going to do the legacy actually first. The death and preservation of Flinders Petrie, right? Now, it's said that he had a remarkable brain, right? His brain was mathematical. It was remembering. He was able to produce 1,000 works, right? That's a lot. So he died on the 28th of July, 1942. His body was interred in the Protestant cemetery on Mount Zion, but he donated his head and thus his brain to the Royal College of Surgeons of London. World War II was then at its height and the head was delayed in transit. This is true, Pat, or whoever. After being stored in a jar in the college basement, its label fell off and no one knew to whom the head belonged. However, it was eventually identified and is now stored but not displayed at the Royal College of Surgeons. Now, I got to be honest, only an archaeologist could want that. There is a popular legend that Hilda brought back her husband's head in a hat box from Jerusalem after the war, but letters in the Petrie Museum archive illustrate that this legend is not true. Legends about archaeologists, we're loving them. We're loving them. Okay. And one thing I didn't mention, I maybe I should have mentioned this. We're not doing an equal comparison really in regards to Kenyon's legacy as we're going to be doing with Flinders Petrie, but I think we've balanced this out by looking in detail about some of Kenyon's work. It's scientific excavation methods, that's legacy. Flinders Petrie's painstaking recording and study of artifacts set new standards in archaeology. He wrote, "I believe the true line of research lies in the noting and comparison of the smallest detail." Thumbs up on that, we can go with that. Seriation in Egyptology, basically looking at the chronology of the site point, not just, so when you haven't got layers, you can compare simple pottery with more advanced pottery giving you a chronology of a site. So he developed that, the relative dating chronology method, right? So we're getting that. Teacher and mentor, okay, a comparison with the likes of Kenyon. Petrie was also responsible for mentoring and training a whole generation of archaeologists. We said exactly the same about Kathleen Kenyon with a tutorship with the University of London. Exactly the same with Flinders Petrie. Howard Carter being one of his offspring. Petrie's on this centennial of Petrie's birth in 1953. I thought he was born in 1856. I've probably got that wrong. Yeah, I'm going to double check this a minute. Yes, I got his birth. I got his birth date wrong. It was 1853. So you go, centenary of 1953. I was wrong. See, I admit it. His widow, Hilda Petrie, created a student travel scholarship to Egypt. Oh yeah, the comparison I was going to make with Kathleen Kenyon was that Kathleen Kenyon's part of her anatomical collection ended up in Australia, and when they studied the anatomical collection in Australia, they worked out that the likes of tuberculosis weren't in the earlier bones, but in the later bones, they had evidence of it, indicating that places like Jericho were site X, were the beginnings of some of these afflictions. Anyway, many thousands of artifacts recovered during excavations led by Petrie can be found in museums across the world. So his name is mentioned, like Kenyon, at different museums. The Petrie Medal for Archaeology. The Petrie Medal was created in celebration of Petrie's 70th birthday, when funds were raised to commission and produce 20 medals to be awarded once in every 3 years for distinguished work in archaeology, preferably to a British subject. The first medal was awarded to Petrie himself. I didn't know that in 1925. And the first few recipients included a Sir Stein in 1928, Sir Arthur Evans, 1931 for his work at Knossos, Abbé Henri Brel, 1934, French archaeologist, J.D. Bezel, another archaeologist, 1937. Sir Mortimer Wheeler had the Petrie Medal in 1950, the irony of it. J.B. Wason, 1953, and Sir Leonard Woolley in 1957. So by now, all the Petrie medals must have been awarded, surely. There is something negative to be said about Petrie, but I'm not going to read it. I'm trying to keep this positive. Palestinian archaeology. There you go. That puts Kenyon alongside Petrie again. Petrie, Palestinian archaeology's involvement in Palestinian archaeology was examined in the exhibition, A Future for the Past, Petrie's Palestinian collection. Yeah, that's very important, very, very important. Memorial in August 2012, more than 100 people gathered at Petrie's grave to commemorate the 20th anniversary of his death. Hang on a minute. Grave. Yeah, okay. There's his grave. Headstone in the Protestant cemetery in Jerusalem, 2009. Flinders Petrie. His headstone is marked only with his name and an ankh symbol, the Egyptian hieroglyph for life. I'm going to keep this to only 4 minutes now, and then we're going to finish. And his archaeological career in Britain, as we know, he worked. He actually worked at Stonehenge at the age of 19. He produced the most accurate survey of Stonehenge at the age of 19. Mathematics again there, Peter. The Giza survey, the work at the Great Pyramids, the accurate survey of Giza, making him the first to properly investigate how the pyramids there were constructed. His theories are still their triangulation system. Was exemplary in its methodology and accuracy. He was appalled back in the 1880s of the rate of destruction of monuments. Some listed in guidebooks had been worn away completely since then, and mummies. He described Egypt as a house on fire, so rapid was the destruction. I felt his duty to be that of a salvage man, to get all I could as quickly as possible. And then, when I was 60, I would sit and write it all. Bloody hell. Do you know, I'm not Flinders Petrie, but that's how I've done my archaeological work over my lifetime. I've published personally about a quarter of my work, right? And I've got some wonderful projects that I'm trying to work on now. And so I'm following in the shoes of Petrie, who just published this stuff later on in life. Well, I've got to get on with mine as soon as. Returning to England in the end of the 1880s, we're talking about working in the Egyptian Exploration Fund, and we're talking about he's later appointed the Egyptian chair at the University of College London. Impressed by his scientific approach, the university offered him work as the successor to Edward Neville, Petrie accepted the position and was given the sum of £250 per month to cover excavation expenses. So whoever wondered where this guy's money came from, as I said, we get the money through excavations, not selling artifacts from excavations, but by what we're paid in regards to the excavation work that we actually undertake. So, you know, we are coming to the end of this lecture today, and we've put a lot in it. And he excavated at Tanis, New Kingdom site, in 170 workmen. He cut out the middleman role of foreman, and all subsequent excavations. He was obsessed with taking over control of the excavations. Right, he was the one who did the work. Catherine Kenyon. So yeah, there's so many comparisons here. So many comparisons. Obviously, working in the Eastern Nile Delta to really understand sort of work there. Working on the Nile, the Fayum burials, and the Fayum burials, really interesting. It was very difficult to date them, so he needed to sort of work out a new method of being able to date the work at Fayum. And working at Palestine, obviously, that was in 1890. Now, obviously, Catherine Kenyon wasn't alive then, but leading to much important work and his 6-week excavation, being the first scientific excavation of an archaeological site in the Holy Land in 1890. What? How is that? How is that? You know, Talamana, working at the Amana site, being one of the first to find what the lost city of Akhenaten, the city of Tartan, and working in Israel and the various cemeteries in Egypt. Obviously, moving through this quite quick now, because we're coming to the end. Obviously, various discoveries in Egypt, working in Palestine, Luxor, moving to Jerusalem to do more work there, and we've mentioned that. But one thing now, this is a quote unquote, Petrie's mental capacity, right? And this is what we'll finish on with Petrie, right? Again, as we finished with Kenyon, the Petrie's one of the greats. But the final thing here, Petrie's extraordinary visual memory. Mr. Flinders Petrie, a contributor of interesting experiments on kindred subjects to nature, informs me that he habitually works out sums by aid of imaginary sliding rule, which he sets in the desired way and reads off mentally. He didn't have a calculator, obviously. He does not usually visualize the whole rule, but only that part of it with which he is at the moment concerned. I think this is one of the most striking cases of accurate visualizing power it is possible to imagine. This guy, like Kenyon, had ideas that were beyond his time, and ideas that we can only be in awe at today. And both Flinders Petrie and Kathleen Kenyon are a non-married couple that are great couples in archaeology with equal contributions, and they're the greats within the world of the discipline of archaeological study. And that's it today. That's where we're going to finish. Let's see if there's any questions. And Pat's still with us. Somebody else put something else in the chat box. Was it her excavation, or did she work alongside archaeologists from other nations? This, I think are you talking about the work, Margaret, at Great Zimbabwe with Gertrude Cato Thompson. Therefore, it was basically, I think there was an American archaeologist there, I think, if that's what you're referring to.
It
Right,
could apply to either of them, actually. Did either of them work with archaeologists from other nations?
Not really.
No. So it was their excavation.
Their work.
Yes.
And as you can see, both of them were obsessed with being in charge.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Both Kathleen Kenyon and Flinders Petrie wore the trousers.
Right.
They may have, you know, There you go. Anything else you'd like to say, Margaret, before I ask Pat?
Well, except bless her, she wouldn't have been able to buy a house or vote, would she? Despite all the other achievements.
Exactly. So there we go. Kathleen Kenyon, eat your heart out. Thank you for that, Margaret. Pat.
Okay.
There was a word you used and I couldn't understand it. You know, we talk about
Seriation.
you know, well, no, it's about the chronological and serrated, and then there was something that sounded like stenography.
No, seriation. Seriation.
Was seriation. There was another one like stenographobia or something.
Oh, right. But who was this? Was this
I don't know. You were talking away about all these things. You know, note everything down, chronological, serrated.
Right. By linking styles of pottery with periods, he was the first to use seriation. Hang on a minute. Oh God. Where is that? Where is that in my notes? I don't know.
That's all right. No, I just thought it was something common and I didn't know it.
Hang on a minute. It's seriation. Hang on a minute. Seriation methodology. I think it was just seriation we were talking about. I've got to be honest with you.
Okay, if you come across something that sounds like Stephony or photography or something, style audio, I don't know. Anyhow, no one else has heard of it.
I'm looking for my notes now. I'm just trying to. No, I can't.
That's all right. That's okay.
I can't find it. Anyway, if we do, we'll get back to it. Thank you for that, Pat.
Okay.
Okay then. Right. Anyone else? Who else? Drina.
Well, I've probably got a stupid question. You know, when the layers are built up with soil and whatever, does that mean if that's going up, does that mean other parts of the world are going down?
What do you mean?
Does that make sense? Well, it must come from somewhere.
Right.
All this stuff.
Basically, the layers are building up from being deposits from that moment. Is that what we're talking about? And then, right. No, the ground is being built up by the layers. Yeah, the ground is being built up by the layers of human occupation.
Yeah, but where's that coming from?
Oh, that's coming from us.
Moon dust.
Right. I see what you mean. All right. So where's all this crap coming from? So obviously, bits of broken pottery, which is from clay from a river. So in other words, everything's relative, isn't it? So something's moved from somewhere to be deposited somewhere, and that's built up the layers, or in the Middle East, we call them tells.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's answered that question.
No.
Oh, well, what do you mean? So
it's kind of like erosion. It just sort of erodes.
Yeah. So basically, everything decays and creates that deposit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, if your house, your flat now, right? Say you just left it and nobody ever used it again, the walls would collapse in, and then on top of that, earth would form to create grass. And then somebody would think, oh, what I'll do, I'll put a tower on top of that mound of earth, and then that would create another layer, and that's how layers are built up.
Is the earth getting bigger then?
No, it's not because it's not because material's coming from somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's being built up from somewhere else. All of our stuff, all of our pottery comes from clay in the ground somewhere. Building bricks, they come from clay in the ground. It just builds up the layers. That's how it's working.
It's urbanization. People are living there and they're just piling stuff up and bones.
Oh, thank God we got an answer. Urbanization. We'll go for that one.
I'm just thinking it's more like particles that I'm thinking of.
Yes.
Where are the particles coming from? Yes.
It's just dust, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just being built up, just different layers built up. Okay.
But I still don't know where it's coming from.
But basically, it's moving from one. Basically, as you're eating, right? As you're eating, you're creating manure, right? And that builds up a layer, and that's your cesspits. It's all creating layers and deposits.
Okay.
So in some places, getting down to the Roman layer, you're not digging as far down as in other places.
Yes, basically what happens in if it's up in upland areas, you can have prehistoric stuff very near close to the surface. If it's in the valleys, because the material in the upland layers are built up layers in the valleys, you can have those prehistoric layers about 2 or 3 meters underneath that surface because of erosion. Right, we need to look at erosion next week for you. Right, we're going to do erosion next week for you. All right.
Okay.
Erosion.
Yep, great.
Erosion for Drina. Oh my God, we're getting everything. By the way, synchronisms with Greek pottery. Synchronisms. The seriation of synchronisms with Greek pottery.
Synchronisms. Ooh.
The synchronisms, looking at
Amazing.
the synchronisms with different areas where basically there's linked with influences and so on. The synchronisms with different areas of the Mediterranean. The synchronicity.
Right.
Oh God,
Okay.
that was a lot. You've got that, Pat, yeah?
Got it. Thank you.
Makes
Oh,
your
thank
brain
God for that.
hurt a bit,
Why
doesn't
are we
it?
getting so many complicated questions? My head's gone. Right. Peter, anything from you before you fall asleep?
Too late.
He's asleep. He's asleep.
No, night, Pete. Right. Andy, anything you'd like to say?
No, that's fine. I'm just always amazed that people like that can make such a contribution.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they did.
and they're
And
two of the biggest ones. So.
massive.
Were
They are two of the
there
biggest ones.
any eminent
Hang on a minute.
archaeologists?
We haven't asked David yet.
Oh,
David,
sorry.
anything you'd like to say?
No, I'm going to go now. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay.
Okay,
everybody.
Dave.
Good night,
Bye,
David.
See you next week, Dave. Take care. Bye-bye. Margaret, because David would have lost the plot then if I hadn't put him in. Margaret, anything you'd like to say?
Were there any eminent archaeologists from up north?
Nah, not from
They
Cumbria,
all
no.
seem to be as southerners, don't they?
Yeah. Wealthy.
That's where the money is.
They get their education.
Things just haven't changed then, have they?
We're too
Boy,
busy
Iron Man.
working.
They're what, Drina?
We're too busy working.
Yeah. With our flat caps and our whippets.
That's the one. Yeah.
No, I bought it, Tommy.
Oh, bloody
Sorry.
hell. Oh, we haven't heard of Tommy for a while either.
No, I've kind of lost touch with him, unfortunately. I think I've still got his number on my old phone, but it didn't transfer across to my new one, so I'll try and dig it out.
We need to get in touch with Tommy. We need to
Yeah.
get in touch.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got to do an image labeling the periods from this and trying to fit that in with another image from Tim Eagle, which should help Drina's question.
Ooh.
So we've already set Drina's question up earlier on in the lecture anyway. So Drina's question will be answered when we do it. Right. So what we're going to do, Peter.
He's gone.
Hey, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to phone him now to see if we wake him. This is what his reaction.
no.
Oh
This
no.
is, go on. He's going to be waiting.
Let him sleep.
He's paid for a good sleep.
All right. Okay, guys. Do you want me to wake him or not?
No.
Well, I just
Oh,
hope
okay.
there's no flies in that room.
Or spiders.
Or spiders or mice. Or
Or
mice.
Yeah.
Or corn snake. Can you
I'm
imagine that?
going. I'm going to
Right.
say
Okay then.
goodbye.
Okay.
Good night,
Nobody's
Pat.
got anything
See you
else to
soon.
say.
Bye.
No night, Pat. No night, Pat. So we're all going to go now, are we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't be
Okay,
here
then.
next week.
Ooh.
Okay. Oh, you're still there?
I'll be in hospital having an
When-
operation
when are you having it?
next Tuesday.
Oh,
Tuesday.
yeah. Anne was having an operation. That's why Jim joined us tonight. Yeah, that's right.
I'm having a sex change, so I'll be coming back as Malcolm.
Okay.
What the?
Whatever.
Okay. What?
I think you should experience everything in your lifetime.
No.
No. Going a bit.
As a sex change bloke said to me, he said, "Yep, I'm gonna have a sex change into a woman, but I'm not gonna have a bloke thumping on top of me." He said.
Ooh.
Oh,
No, that's his
we better
words.
go. We better go.
I
Yeah.
think we got because Andy's having a sex. Oh, Margaret's having a sex change. So Margaret, watch out what you're getting into. You'll have to have relations with a woman.
Right. So I'm gonna go in a minute, but I'm gonna leave you this. One of my friends contacted me and said his wife was on Oxenholme Station the other day, right, waiting for a train, and a train came through, and on the display on the front it says, "Today I will be identifying as a train," scrolling across the front of
Oh,
it.
fantastic.
Probably got the sack now. But
Yeah, I think he probably has.
Yeah.
God's sake, Andy. God,
Yeah, I
that's
thought-
good.
yeah, I think
Okay.
trains should be left alone. It's nice to see
Yeah.
them when they turn up.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they should be male or female, Andy.
I
really?
think we should do away with all these pronouns and things and just have one, and then it'll cover everybody, and then nobody will be upset, and nobody will be
Yes.
upset, nobody offended, and there won't have to be any identification problems or
Yes.
confusion.
Yeah.
So in other words, they.
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or rabbit.
Did Thomas the Tank Engine, were they all boy engines?
Yes.
Thomas the Tank
Except for the one, Clary. She was a
There
girl.
was one girly one, wasn't there?
She was pink. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, I
No.
think,
Pink.
No.
There was a pink, and I think later on they put
I
more
think
into
one
it.
of those little trams was female as well, but I can't remember. But I don't remember any of
Oh,
the locomotives.
Clarion.
being-
Clarence and Clarabelle.
Yeah, that's it. But I don't remember any of the steam locomotives, any of them being female at all. But just because they've got boys' names doesn't mean to say they're boys, of course.
Oh, shut up!
Ugh.
Hey, I was on a campsite the other day and it was like an 8 and a 9-year-old, and the eight with her mum there said, "Oh, mum, I've got a girlfriend," and it was like, and they've been told at school about all this bumming transgender stuff and whatever, and I'm thinking, oh my God. Anyway, how did we get onto this? I'm gonna have my station. I'm gonna have my channel banned at this rate.
Oh,
Absolutely.
God, yes, that's
Yes.
true.
I
Yeah.
did notice that we had an equal number of males and females today, which was
Oh,
very
good.
good.
That's
Good, good.
Yeah.
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 I think we should have more women, Andy, but never mind.
That's why you do archaeology.
Shut up, Andy!
Oh, right.
Bad boy.
It's good to have a
Absolutely.
balance, isn't
It absolutely is. And was it Pat that was saying that in the 80s you couldn't get in? It was very much like
Yeah.
that years ago. And
Yeah.
you really didn't get a look in.
Yeah.
Or certainly not to be taken seriously. So,
That's
but
true.
now
Exactly.
I was trying to think in the last few years, I've kind of worked kind of 50-50 with males and females,
Mm.
all of which have been, just as good as anybody else. So
Yeah.
Exactly.
in fact,
Exactly.
actually, to be honest, the females have been easier to get on with and get the job done.
Have they?
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
males that are more entrenched, if I am going to stereotype.
Mm.
Oh my God, Andy, stop it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we're going to stereotype Peter. He looks like he is eating flies. Right. Okay, then. Okay. So, all right, then we'll call it a night then.
Yeah. Thanks. Good one.
Okay,
Love
very
those
much.
two.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad. And thanks for your contribution, Andy, and everything. So, Andy.
Yeah.
We're going to say good night to you. We're going to say good night to Margaret and Peter and Drina, and I'll speak to you all soon.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks,
Thanks, Carl.
I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
See you Tuesday. Bye-bye. Night-night. Night-night. Peter's still there. Anyone online still? Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm done. We're gonna look. I'm gonna see quickly if there are any questions. There was nothing in the live chat at all. Couldn't see anything in the live chat. So we're gonna call it a day. We're gonna call it a day. And don't forget, we're gonna. I'm looking in the chat box. And quickly, I like the chat box. We've got nothing else in the chat box other than the following. I've sent an email with my comments, questions, and technical difficulties. But that's Peter. We got that. We read them out. There you go. Was it her excavations, or did she work alongside archaeologists from other nations? We answered that one. Catherine Kenyon. We got those two things. So one thing from Peter, answer the technical thing. One thing from Margaret, answer the nations thing. On your marks, get set. 1, 2, 3. We're closing that. Night, everybody. Night, Peter. Catching flies, and we'll speak to you soon. Take care. Wednesday tomorrow, 11 o'clock, and in the evening, 7:20. Night.